Well, hello everyone. We have a special treat for you today. In this time travel video, we're going to take a voyage to France and into the life of Claude Monet, the famous French painter. We'll also view his home in Giverny and his beautiful gardens. Claude Monet is widely regarded as the founder of the Impressionist style of painting, which came into vogue in the 1800s. In this video, we'll give you an understanding of this Impressionist style of painting and show you some famous examples. Oscar Claude Monet was born in Paris in November 1814. His parents had wanted him to join their business ventures, but Monet had other ideas. He wanted to become an artist right from the beginning. His mother supported his desire, and he was educated at an art school. Here's a self-portrait of Monet as a young man. Monet did not like the first name Oscar Claude, and he preferred to be called simply Claude Monet. When he was young, Monet began to create sketches to express his feelings about the world around him. These were mostly caricatures about political figures and events. Here's an example of a caricature which he drew when he was only 15. He sold some of his characters for as little as 20 francs, was regarded as a person who had talent, and thus began his career as an artist. As his young life unfolded, Monet traveled within France, to England, and to the Netherlands. He was also inducted into the French army and served in Algeria for 7 years. When he returned to Paris from the army, Monet began his career as a painter in earnest, studying under the various well-known and established artists of the times. These experts helped him to develop his painting skills. In the past, painting was somewhat like photography. Paintings were a realistic interpretation of what the artist was seeing, as shown in this painting of a harbor scene. These paintings were produced mostly indoors, in a studio environment. Accuracy of form and color was stressed, with little attention given to the feelings that the artist experienced at the scene. Monet was not satisfied with how these artists dealt with their subject matter, and so he ignored the teachings of his mentors. Instead, he began to follow a style known as plein air, or out-of-doors painting, where the artist would complete an entire painting while observing the scene in nature. Now here is Monet's interpretation of a similar harbor scene. This is one of his most famous works, called Sunrise. It's the same subject as the previous photo, but the painting is an impression of the scene as the artist sees it. Here you not only see the harbor and the ships, but you also get a sense of how Monet feels about this scene. Monet uses nuances of color and light to bring forth the emotion and the atmosphere of what he is observing. Again, this image is not an exact replica of the original scene. It is vague, and it leaves room for the viewer to use his own imagination to fill in the blanks. This painting was one of the first to be described as Impressionist in style, and consequently it gave birth to the name of this style of painting. Here are two more examples of Monet's Impressionist style. In each pair of images that you will see, the first is an actual photograph of Monet's lily pond. The image is clear and sharp, and the colors are accurate to nature. By contrast, this second photo is Monet's impression of the lily pond. It shows his feelings about the serenity of the scene and the beauty of the flowers. He expresses these feelings in the color and form he chooses for the flowers and the settings. These images are not photographically exact, but they do flow smoothly, gracefully, and peacefully in the waters of the pond and also into the viewer's mind. Here are some examples of Monet's Impressionist style as it developed over the years. The first is his painting of the London Parliament at sunset, which he painted in 1904. The next is his interpretation of the Grand Canal in Venice, painted in 1908. In these two paintings, you can clearly see his departure from photographic images. The next is his impression of the cliffs at Etretat. He painted this in 1885. These cliffs are nicknamed the Elephant and the Needle. Can you see why? This next painting is called The Regatta at Saint Adresse. Here Monet and you are one of the spectators, and you can almost feel the excitement of the yachts vying for position at the start of the race. The next is one of my favorites, Monet's painting of a train arriving at the Gare Saint-Lazare, a train station in Paris, which he painted in 1877. In this painting, you can almost feel the drama of the engine belching steam and thundering into the station. The next is called The Artist's Garden in Argenteuil, that he painted in 1873. A clear contrast to the drama of the train station at Saint-Lazare. This painting clearly conveys the beauty and serenity of Monet's flower garden. Monet lived in Argenteuil, a suburb of Paris, for several years before moving to Giverny. Finally, we have the red boats at Argenteuil, another one of my favorites, painted in 1875. Here, the vivid use of color and light conveys the excitement of the boats preparing for the regatta. Monet uses merging brushstrokes to depict the clear blue sky and varying broad brushstrokes of blue and purple to show the depth of the choppy waters. Because of Monet's departure from the accepted style of painting, his work did not sell very well in Paris, and he was having trouble supporting his growing family. So, in 1883, Monet moved his family to a small house he had rented in Giverny, a village about 1 hour northwest of Paris. In Giverny, he could leave behind the hectic and competitive life of Paris and continue his work in peace and on his own terms. Giverny is a small, quiet village in the French countryside. It is peaceful, friendly, and conducive to reflection and the enjoyment of nature. To this day, amateur artists flock to this town to be inspired by the bucolic surroundings. As Monet's work became more popular, he was able to purchase the house in Giverny and its surrounding lands. He then began a series of improvements, first to the house itself and later to the land. Here are some photos of the interior of his home. These photos clearly show his mastery of bright colors and the emotions that these colors evoke in the viewer's mind. His dining room, for example, is a bright but warm and pleasing yellow, which makes the diners feel relaxed as they enjoy the company of their companions and their meal. Here in the kitchen, by contrast, is a wonderful, inviting, and very original shade of blue, which evokes a feeling of creativity and calm efficiency. Next, we take a look at Monet's bedroom, where we once again see an artful and creative combination of colors that create an atmosphere of peace and quiet, just what one should have to produce a restful sleep. Finally, here in Monet's studio, we see his workspace and numerous examples of his paintings. Keep in mind that this studio was mainly his base camp, where he kept his tools, art supplies, and completed works. Monet did most of his work au plein air, or out of doors, immersed in his subject and its environment. Once the house was completed, Monet then began a series of improvements to the gardens, which were surrounding the home, to reflect his passion about natural beauty. The first improvement was what he called the Clos Normand, a closed flower garden immediately surrounding the house. As you can see here, this Clos Normand was full of bright, colorful flowers which greeted Monet immediately upon his exiting the house in the morning. Beyond the Clos Normand, Monet developed an extensive and well-organized flower garden where he and his family could wander along serene pathways to enjoy the abundance and variety of the blooming flowers he had planted there. Here are some examples of the many beautiful flowers that were planted in this extensive garden. And here's a photo of Monet sitting in the garden, enjoying the lovely scene and perhaps contemplating a new painting. In the water garden, he included quiet backwaters and nooks where one could calmly drift in a boat or anchor the boat to pause a while and absorb the beauty of the scene. Although Monet never traveled outside of France, he was inspired and captivated by the beauty and the fresh style of Japanese art, which he had viewed on a visit to Amsterdam. These Japanese paintings inspired the creation of his water garden. And as a tribute to the Japanese artists, Monet constructed an arched bridge, like those he had seen in the Japanese paintings, right in the center of his water garden. This unique bridge was to become the hallmark of his water garden in Giverny. It is featured prominently in many of his paintings and in almost every publication about Monet or his art. Finally, and most famously, Monet planted numerous water lilies, which produced the beautiful flowers that became the subject of his paintings in the later years of his life. In time, many other painters followed his lead and adopted the Impressionist style. These include Edouard Monet, Renoir, Camille Pissarro, Paul Cézanne, Edgar Degas, later Vincent van Gogh, just to name a few. Here are some examples of their works. The first is Edouard Monet. The painting is called The Laundry. The next is also by Monet. It's called The Bar at the Folies Bergère. Next, we see Pierre-Auguste Renoir's painting of Two Sisters, and then his interpretation of a luncheon at the boating landing. In the next painting, Paul Cézanne depicts three card players, and then a scene on the Seine at Bercy. The next is by Émile Pissarro, titled The Seine and the Louvre, and his next painting is the Boulevard Montmartre in the springtime. The next is Edgar Degas, A Dancer on Stage, or The Star. His next painting is titled A Lady with Flowers. And finally, one of my favorites, Vincent van Gogh's interpretation of A Starry Night, which we have seen everywhere. And finally, a self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh himself. Finally, here is a photo of Monet in his final years of life. He died on December 5th, 1926, in Giverny at the age of 86. He is buried there amidst his waterways, his Japanese bridge, and the beautiful flowers that he loved so much. His close friend, Georges Clemenceau, the President of France, attended his funeral. This concludes our video. I hope you have been entertained, and I hope you have also learned something about Impressionist painters and the beauty of the style that was begun by Claude Monet. Thank you.